Today is March 3, 2026. Missiles are flying over Tehran. Smoke is rising from the streets of Tel Aviv. The United States and Israel launched a joint military campaign against Iran just 4 days ago, and the world is holding its breath, because nobody knows what happens next. But here's what very few people are saying out loud. This moment, this exact week, was seen thousands of years ago. Not by a modern analyst, not by a geopolitical think tank, but by an ancient man who walked with God so closely that death itself never touched him. A man so aligned with heaven's timeline that his very name became synonymous with divine revelation. His name was Enoch. And today, we are going to go through something that may permanently change how you read the headlines. Because the Book of Enoch does not just describe a distant, vague future. It describes our world, this world, with a level of precision that should make every serious student of prophecy sit straight up in their chair. Stay with me through the end, because what we are about to uncover connects ancient text to today's breaking news in ways that are not easy to dismiss. This is not speculation. This is the pattern of heaven unfolding in real time. Let's begin. Part 1. Who was Enoch, and why does it matter? Most people know the name. Very few understand the weight of it. Enoch lived in the 7th generation from Adam. He was the great-grandfather of Noah, the father of Methuselah, the oldest man in recorded human history. And Methuselah's name itself contains a prophecy. Scholars who study Hebrew etymology have long noted that his name means something along the lines of, "His death shall send it," or, "When he dies, it will come." The year Methuselah died, the flood arrived. Enoch encoded a divine countdown into the very name he gave his own son. Think about that. Not just a man who walked righteously, a man who embedded prophetic code into everyday life. The Bible gives Enoch a remarkably brief mention in Genesis, and yet what it says is the most extraordinary thing written about any human being before the New Testament. Genesis 5:24 states simply, "Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him." No funeral, no grave, no death. In a genealogy where every entry ends with, "and he died," Enoch is the one name that breaks the pattern entirely. And the prophet Jude, writing in the New Testament, tells us that Enoch did not simply walk and disappear. He prophesied. He saw the future and spoke it out loud. Jude 1:14-15 records Enoch's words, that the Lord would come with tens of thousands of his holy ones to execute judgment against all the ungodly, against all the deeds of ungodliness they had committed, and against all the harsh words that ungodly sinners had spoken against God. This is the only prophecy of Enoch that survives in the canonical Bible. But there is another text, one that has fascinated scholars, theologians, and serious students of end-times thought for centuries. It is called 1 Enoch, and fragments of it were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church never removed it from their canon, and it contains visions so detailed, so layered with historical and future content, that serious scholars across multiple traditions have spent lifetimes studying it. So what does Enoch actually describe? And how does it connect to what is happening right now, on this specific day? Part 2. The Apocalypse of Weeks, a hidden blueprint. One of the most overlooked sections of 1 Enoch is what scholars call the Apocalypse of Weeks. Found in chapters 91 and 93, it presents human history as a series of 10 great weeks. Not 7-day periods, but vast eras of time, each defined by a dominant spiritual theme. And here is where it gets striking. Enoch's Apocalypse of Weeks traces a trajectory from the dawn of righteous humanity, through the descent into violence, idolatry, and moral catastrophe, and then through the ages of the law, the temple, the Messiah, and finally, the last days. In the 7th week, Enoch describes an apostate generation, a generation where wickedness explodes, where the righteous are a minority, and where deception saturates the leadership of nations and even the religious establishment. Sound familiar? In the 8th week, which many scholars believe we may now be approaching, he describes a righteous sword being given to the remnant, a time when the oppressors begin to face the consequences of their actions, a time when the structures of evil that seemed permanent and invincible begin to crack and fall. But before that transition, there is conflict, there is upheaval, there is blood. What Enoch describes in the transition between the 7th and 8th week is not a peaceful handoff. It is a convulsion. Nations rise against nations. Leaders who built empires on violence find violence returning to their own doors. And those who have long claimed to speak for God are exposed and removed. Now, a critical caution. We do not know the precise length of each week in Enoch's framework. Scholars have proposed multiple calculations. Some tie each week to hundreds of years, others to generational cycles. The point is not to set a date. The Bible itself warns sharply against that. The point is to recognize the season. And right now, in the first week of March 2026, the season is unmistakable. Enoch saw about nations and war. Beyond the apocalypse of weeks, First Enoch is filled with visions of cosmic and geopolitical turmoil. In chapter 56, Enoch describes a vision in which the kings of the east and the kings of the west are stirred up, where they march against each other, where armies flood into a particular region of the world. The text speaks of chariots being overturned, warriors falling upon each other, and blood soaking the ground. The region described? Many scholars who take First Enoch seriously as a prophetic document point to language that, when placed alongside Ezekiel and Daniel, consistently draws attention back to the Middle East. The lands of Media, Persia, and the surrounding territories. The ancient geography of what we now call Iran. And then consider what has happened in just the last 96 hours. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched coordinated joint strikes against Iran in what was officially named Operation Roaring Lion by Israel and Operation Epic Fury by the American Department of Defense, which, notably, was renamed the Department of War by the Trump administration just weeks earlier. The opening salvo struck the compound known as Leadership House in Tehran. The following day, video emerged of the IRGC Malik Ashtar military complex, reduced to rubble. And in the early hours of March 3, 2026, today, Israel targeted the headquarters of Iran's state broadcaster. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, is dead. Iran has retaliated by launching missiles and drones against Israel, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia. The United States State Department has urged all American citizens to leave the Middle East immediately. As of this morning, the death toll from U.S.-Israeli strikes inside Iran stands at 787 confirmed dead, with hundreds more wounded. Missiles have struck a girls' elementary school in the southeastern city of Minab, reportedly killing approximately 180 children, a strike that the Iranian Foreign Ministry has called a war crime. This is not a rumor of war. This is war. And Enoch, writing thousands of years ago, described exactly this kind of moment, this exact region, this exact configuration of power, as a pivotal turning point in the divine timeline. Part 4. The Watchers, the Fallen, and the Structure of Hidden Power. Before we go further into the prophetic architecture of our current moment, we need to understand something that Enoch reveals about the deeper framework behind human conflict. First Enoch dedicates its opening sections, the Book of the Watchers, to a staggering claim. Before the flood, a group of angelic beings called the Watchers descended to earth. Their leader is named Semjaza. They took human wives. They produced offspring described as giants, the Nephilim. And they transmitted to humanity a series of hidden knowledges, the arts of war, the making of weapons, sorcery, astrology used for domination rather than wisdom, and the manipulation of political structures. Now here is what Enoch emphasizes that most people skip over. The Watchers did not just corrupt individuals. They corrupted systems. They corrupted leadership structures. They embedded darkness into the machinery of how nations govern themselves. And those systems, Enoch declares, do not get cleaned up gradually. They get judged, specifically and catastrophically. The angelic beings responsible are bound in chains of darkness until the day of final reckoning. But the institutional corruption they seeded, the patterns of weaponized deception, the worship of power, the willingness to slaughter children for political objectives, these continue to operate through history until the moment of divine intervention. Look at what we are watching today. The United States has just confirmed that it struck a girls' elementary school in Iran. The Iranian government killed thousands of its own protesters in January 2026. Leaders on every side are using the vocabulary of security and justice while children bleed in the streets. This is not new. This is exactly the pattern Enoch identified as the fingerprint of the Watcher system. The corruption of power that predates even the flood, resurfacing in every generation that refuses to be accountable to a higher moral authority. And Enoch's word to every such generation is the same. Judgment is coming. Not because God is angry in a petty human way, but because the system that destroys the innocent cannot be permitted to continue indefinitely. There is a limit, and when that limit is reached, the reckoning begins. Part 5. The 30 in general far. The next 28. And why March 3rd is not the end. Here is the part of Enoch that people most misread. Throughout 1st Enoch, particularly in the section known as the parables or similitudes of Enoch, there appears a figure called the Son of Man. This is not a political messiah. This is not a military commander. The Son of Man in Enoch exists before creation, is hidden from the powerful, and is revealed at the moment appointed by the one who sits on the heavenly throne. He comes not to take a side in geopolitical conflict. He comes to judge every side. The kings, the mighty, the wealthy who built their empires on the backs of the poor, they all stand before him. And in that moment, says Enoch, their power evaporates. Every alliance they made with darkness, every innocent life they sacrificed for strategic advantage, is laid bare. Enoch makes something very clear. The current chaos is not the judgment itself. The current chaos is the birth pang that precedes it. This is critical for our moment on March 3, 2026. What is happening right now in the skies over Tehran, in the missile-lit nights above Tel Aviv, in the shocked silence of Gulf cities watching Iranian drones breach their airspace, this is not the final chapter. This is the chapter that shakes people awake. This is the chapter that forces the question, is anyone actually in control? The answer Enoch gives is both sobering and strangely comforting. The answer is yes. But the one in control is not Trump, not Netanyahu, not Khamenei's successors, not the generals issuing orders from underground bunkers tonight. The one in control sits on a throne that no weapon has ever reached, and he sees every missile. He knows every name of every child in every school struck by every bomb, on every side, in every war. He is not surprised by March 3, 2026. He knew it was coming before the mountains existed. Part 6. The Pattern of Judgment on Elam. Ancient Text, Modern Conflict. Now this is where things become almost uncanny. The prophet Jeremiah, centuries before Christ, received a specific word about a specific nation. In Jeremiah 49:34-38, God declares judgment on Elam. And Elam, as any serious student of biblical geography knows, corresponds to the southwestern region of modern-day Iran, the exact territory that includes Khuzestan, where some of Iran's most strategic oil infrastructure sits, and coastal areas near the Persian Gulf. God says through Jeremiah, I will shatter the bow of Elam, the foremost of their might. The bow was the primary offensive weapon of that era. To shatter the bow meant to destroy a nation's offensive military capacity. And then Jeremiah continues, I will scatter Elam to all these winds, and there will be no nation to which the exiles from Elam will not go. As of this morning, Iran's top security official has announced the formation of an interim leadership council. The regime's top military commanders have been killed. Reports suggest that the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the very backbone of Iran's offensive military apparatus, has suffered catastrophic losses in just 4 days of strikes. American intelligence sources are now confirming that 50% of Iran's ballistic missile launchers have been destroyed. The bow of Elam is being shattered. Right now. In real time. As we speak. But Enoch's framework and Jeremiah's prophecy both contain something beyond judgment. They contain a promise embedded in the rubble. Jeremiah 49:39 says, But it shall come to pass in the latter days that I will bring back the captives of Elam, declares the Lord. Even in the destruction, the door is not sealed shut forever. The story does not end in ashes. This mirrors exactly what the Book of Enoch describes in its final chapters. The 8th week brings judgment. The 9th week brings the dismantling of systems built on oppression. But the 10th week? The 10th week is renewal. It is the righteous planted like trees on mountains of light. It is the world rebuilt not by political winners, but by divine design. The signs Enoch said would surround this moment. Let's walk through what First Enoch and the broader Enochic tradition describe as the environment surrounding the great turning points of the divine plan. First, the multiplication of secret knowledge. Enoch warns that one of the hallmarks of the final age is the explosive growth of information, particularly destructive knowledge. We live in the age of artificial intelligence, precision-guided weaponry, cyber warfare capable of dismantling nations in seconds. The living Nostradamus, Athos Salome, who has drawn significant attention for his eerily accurate predictions, including the death of Queen Elizabeth and the COVID pandemic, has predicted for 2026 a massive solar storm between March 12 and 15 that could trigger widespread power outages, a scenario that, in the middle of an active war involving one of the world's most cyber-capable nations, Israel, and the most sophisticated military in history, the United States, is not merely a mystical warning, but a genuine strategic concern. Second, the corruption of leadership so complete that it becomes visible even to those who previously ignored it. Enoch describes a generation where the leader's wickedness cannot be hidden anymore. And right now, in this week, the world is watching a U.S. president who renamed his own Department of Defense the Department of War, launching strikes alongside Israel that have killed hundreds, including children, while simultaneously, the Iranian government that killed thousands of its own citizens in January 2026 fires missiles at civilians across 9 countries. There are no clean hands in this conflict. Enoch said the final season would be characterized by an absence of righteous leadership at the geopolitical level. He was right. Third, the involvement of many nations, not just one. Enoch's visions of the end season always involve coalitions, not simple one-on-one conflicts. Right now we have the US and Israel on one side, Iran on the other. Iran has already struck 9 countries. NATO AWACS surveillance aircraft were reportedly operating from Turkish airspace. Britain, France, and Germany are warning of defensive action. Iraq's popular mobilization forces are engaged. Hezbollah in Lebanon has been struck by fresh Israeli waves. A drone struck the runway of a UK military base in Cyprus. The whole region is being drawn in. And the ripple effects on global energy shipments. Iran's retaliatory strategy has targeted the Persian Gulf shipping lanes, means the entire world economy is now a participant whether it wants to be or not. Fourth, the convergence of natural and military upheaval. Baba Vanga, the Bulgarian mystic whose predictions have drawn consistent study, described 2026 as a year of massive earthquakes, global conflict, and a first contact with forces beyond human understanding. Her followers argue that the 3-eye Atlas object that has caused significant discussion among astronomers, detected on a trajectory that defies known solar system origin, may represent the alien contact she described. Meanwhile, analysts in the seismic community have flagged heightened fault line activity across multiple regions. The convergence of military, economic, environmental, and cosmic disruption in a single season is precisely what Enoch described as the signature of the end-time transition. Part 8. What Enoch would say to you, personally, right now. We have been talking about nations, about missiles and empires and prophecy. But Enoch's message was never really about empires. It was about people, individual souls standing in the middle of chaotic times, trying to understand which way is up. Enoch walked with God. That is the phrase the Bible uses. Not, Enoch prayed sometimes. Not, Enoch went to the temple regularly. Walked with God. Present tense. Constant. An ongoing, daily, living relationship with the Creator of everything, maintained in the middle of a generation that the Bible describes as corrupted and violent. And the result of that walk? Enoch never tasted death. Now the Enochic tradition, and Hebrews 11 in the New Testament confirms this, ties Enoch's transformation directly to his faith, not to his intellectual understanding of prophecy, not to his ability to calculate timelines, his faith. In the middle of everything falling apart around him, Enoch kept walking. He kept trusting. He kept believing that the one who made the world also held it, and that whatever it looked like from the ground level, the throne was still occupied. That is the message embedded in this ancient man's life that is most relevant on March 3, 2026. You may be watching the news today with your heart rate elevated. You may be watching fires in Tehran and drones over Bahrain and wondering what happens next. You may have family in the Middle East, or you may simply feel the weight of a world that has suddenly become visibly unstable. Enoch would tell you this: Instability at the geopolitical level is not instability at the throne level. He would tell you that the same God who counted every hair on Methuselah's head and embedded a flood countdown into the name of an ordinary baby, that God does not lose track of the days. He does not lose track of you. Part 9. The Enoch Pattern. Liberation through upheaval. Here is the pattern that runs through every major moment in Enoch's prophetic framework, and it is a pattern that also runs through the entire Bible. Before liberation, there is pressure. Before the crossing of the Red Sea, there are plagues. Before the return from Babylon, there is captivity. Before the resurrection, there is the cross. The darkest moment is not the end of the story. It is the pressure point immediately before the breakthrough. The Iranian people understand this in their bones right now. In January 2026, they poured into the streets in what observers called the largest uprising since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Over 100 cities saw protesters. The government responded with massacres. Thousands were killed. And yet the protests did not stop. Something had broken, not in the protesters, but in the regime's capacity to maintain fear as its primary governing tool. And then, on February 28th, the strikes began. The regime's military apparatus is being dismantled. Khamenei is dead. An interim council is scrambling to hold together a government that has spent 47 years governing through fear, and whose fear machine is, in these very days, being taken apart piece by piece. What comes after? No human being can say with certainty. War has its own terrible logic. The humanitarian cost is already staggering and will grow. The risk of escalation is real and must be acknowledged. But the pattern Enoch describes, the shattering of the bow as the prelude to eventual restoration, has been set in motion. The captives of Elam, Jeremiah said, will be brought back. Not immediately, not without pain. But the trajectory points toward a future that the current regime has made impossible to imagine. And sometimes, prophecy works precisely like that. The thing that looks like total catastrophe is also the only door through which the promised future can enter. Part 10. The Final Question. On the middle of the journeyment of the results for Longo. Administrated that the major setup has a grade at least in future and struggle to the program. The final question, and what you do with it. We are living in days when prophecy is no longer an academic exercise. When ancient texts describe the shattering of the military might of Elam, modern Iran, and then you look at your phone and see live footage of the IRGC command centers in rubble, the question stops being theoretical. When Enoch describes a generation saturated with destructive knowledge, where leaders govern by violence and children die for political objectives, and then you read that 180 children were killed in a school in Manab in the same week you're studying his texts, the question stops being comfortable. The question is not simply, did Enoch predict this? The question is, what does it mean that he did? Because if the pattern is real, if the prophetic framework is tracking with history the way it appears to be tracking, then the rest of the pattern is also real. The judgment Enoch describes does not stop at geopolitical upheaval. It reaches every person, every choice, every hidden motive. But so does the promise. The righteous ones in Enoch's 10th week, the ones who come through the fire, are described as shining, as planted, as rooted in something that the shaking of nations cannot uproot. And Enoch's own life is the proof of the promise. In the most violent, corrupted, chaotic generation before the flood, one man walked in such alignment with God that not even death could claim him. That is available to you. Not as a theological abstraction, as a lived reality. Walk with God in this hour, not because you have figured out the prophetic timeline, not because you know what happens next week in Tehran or Washington or Jerusalem, but because the one who sees the end from the beginning also sees you, exactly where you are, on March 3rd, 2026, and he is still walking. Do you believe that what is unfolding right now connects to ancient prophecy? Leave your answer in the comments below. We are living through something that the ancients wrote about, and understanding it, not just experiencing it, makes all the difference. If this opens something for you, share it. Someone in your life needs to see the bigger picture today. And if you want to go deeper, watch our next video, Daniel's Timeline and the Final Empire. Because what Enoch started, Daniel completed. And what Daniel completed we are watching unfold right now. Blessings.